My son, the day you were born, the very forests of Lordaeron whispered the name Arthas.
I loved World of Warcraft. I began playing it in Burning Crusade. I remember logging on the Horde side for the first time and seeing people everywhere, funny conversations in chat, people jumping up on mailboxes and everything. I went with a Ret Paladin as my main, although in that expansion they were massively nerfed and literally no one would let me do raids with them. I'd begged to join groups, but they had a bad rep at the time and I ended up mostly exploring and trying to save up enough money. At some point I got some gold from a sympathetic player and used it to improve my gear and bribe my way into raids. Then Wrath of the Lich King came out. Honestly, I complained about it a lot early on. I cannot remember why, but not for any good reason. I guess it just took a while for me to realize I actually love this thing. At this point, I was really wishing for the ability to alter the look of gear, what would later be introduced in another expansion as transmogging. What can I say? I am a visionary before my time. And of course, everyone loved the cinematic trailer for Wrath. Hell, it's still popular today. Whoever did that should get to wear some kind of special medal around.
I saved the world.
I played Cataclysm with mixed feelings about the big landscape changes and the destruction of really everything. I was both excited by it and disgruntled. A lot of the people who played since vanilla were less happy, and I noted that the expansion wasn't as good as some I'd played, but I was still into WoW. Then Pandera came out, and I really could not get into the game anymore. It wasn't just the changes to mechanics and everything. The whole Kung Fu Panda aesthetic was horrible to me. I super hated it. A crappy cartoon movie and comic, and they centered their whole expansion's look around it. I've truthfully never really been a fan of Chinese culture and myths, so that was another element, but I also fear that part of this reason is because I've not really seen anything good that sold it to me like I have with Japanese culture and myths, which I absolutely love. In fact, I've reached this weird point where I can hear Japanese actors talking in Japanese and can get a basic understanding of what they're saying even though I do not speak or understand a word of the language.
That doesn't make sense.
I think this is how dogs live their entire lives, kinda understanding what we're saying but unable to communicate to us that they have secret intelligence, that cats are preparing to take over the world and enslave us all. And you know they are. The game for me was just not good anymore for reasons I recognized and some that I didn't consciously or fully grasp, including changes to how we acquired PvP gear and what we gained from it. I think Blizzard also didn't and still doesn't understand the concept of world PvP and incentive-based playing. People complained they were constantly ganked while leveling or complained about this and that. At some point, Blizzard got rid of the devoted PvP servers and the ability to buff other people's characters who I was grouped with. These were the biggest blows to me, and I'll explain why. In WoW, both sides, the Alliance and Horde, have a resource, or they did, a treasure and asset, if you will, even if people did not think of them in those terms. That resource was the Lobies leveling up in zones. In a PvP zone, and with no one able to just toggle off PvP, Lobie players, well, everyone really, regardless of level, but most especially those who were in the zone to farm or level up, were a resource to fight over, to protect or go after. Our civilian population in need of protecting or demoralizing to gain control over a zone for bonuses or just because imagining people crying makes you happy.
Yes! Oh, let me taste your tears, Scott.
Huge groups of players were in zones for exactly that reason, to gank people or protect their side from the gankers. We'd have these big battles and everything. I also like to just go up to random people and buff them with paladin spells or fly down and help a Lobie do quests while protecting them against gankers. Blizzard destroyed all that. Afterwards, I'd go into zones in Outlands and there was no one there. A few Lobies or farmers, but world PvP there was dead. No one was talking, no one was grouping up, no PvPing at all. They also redesigned zones to scale levels so you could no longer go into a zone and feel like a god or goddess, crushing huge swaths of NPCs and monsters with no fear of dying yourself. It was worsened as Blizzard's expansions added more and more bloat. Just the continuing addition of new zones or time traveling or pocket dimensions or whatever, and everything got convoluted without a clear path to the direction of the game areas or where to get the quest quest or whatever you should be doing. Blizzard tried to address this, but it's not been enough. Perhaps not a huge deal for players who are regularly and actively playing the game, but if you took a break for a year and came back, the game was a confusing mess to you. Puzzling out where to go and what to do almost required a week of research. God only knows what new players experienced logging into the mess back then. Lost and overwhelmed, most likely. I came back to World of Warcraft after the Legion expansion was released, which I loved, but I remember that it was a fair amount of work to figure out what the hell was going on and what to do. Then I quit again, mostly for good. Tried a couple times briefly to get back into it, but they hadn't reversed the changes they made to the game, which sapped it. Well, a few expansions came and went, and then finally the Dragonflight expansion released. I heard good things about it and figured I'd give it a try, downloaded it, and went in. And everything about the game was just different to me. Unrecognizable in many respects. Trade chat was full of spammers. No one was talking and having conversations. I thought, well, maybe this was just a bad zone or time of day. Came back another day at a different time and same thing. Trade chat was just spam city. Orgrimmar felt dead. I didn't see anyone talking or hanging out in the usual places. No impromptu dance party outside the bank. No people jumping off buildings trying to end up on top of a mailbox. Only handfuls of people going straight to whatever business. I also found out that I had no idea where to go or what I should be doing because of the reasons I mentioned before. Convoluted story and zone direction. There is so much to the game, and to top themselves, each new expansion, or just from a lack of good ideas, they kept doubling down on the time warp, phases, and other planar existences and the like. I couldn't remember most of it. I had mounts and pets and couldn't for the life of me remember where I got them, what expansion each was from, and to be clear, you buttheads out there who are going to mumble some boomer comment, this is just not about age. I'm not that old and my memory isn't that bad. Seriously, quit the game for 2 years and then come back and tell me that it's not a confusing and overwhelming mess. And that's not even counting the chore it would be to relearn and acquire the add-ons, figure out what everybody is using and how to use them, what website you should be looking at, figuring out all over again what build and rotations to use for the new abilities, spend an enormous amount of time watching videos on how to do this thing and then that thing, researching where you should go, relearning the chain of events, areas, and quests you have to do to get where you want to be, if you even know what that is. So I told myself, we'll just start over from scratch and level a new character, figure out all this stuff at a healthy pace, and all that I forgot will come back to me. Except they changed the linear design meant to educate you, at least as I had done for all my main characters, both Horde and Alliance. Now you basically pursue your own path with various choices along the way. That might be good for new players, maybe. Perhaps giving choice, it also divides the game into chewable pieces, but for me as a returning player, it had the opposite effect. This wasn't the game as I knew it. It just added yet more complexity to something that is already overly complex. It felt tedious. It felt alien. The game felt wrong. It also felt like I was playing a single player game. Now, maybe everyone was in the Dragonflight zones and that's where all the activity was, but I'd never played an expansion before where Org or Stormwind weren't hopping and the chat was full of people talking, even during off hours. It was one of the biggest selling points of this game that I could log in at any time and tons of people would be there. I might not get to raid with my guild or easily find groups to do, well, whatever, but there was a living feel to it. I did not feel that now. During a patch for Wrath of the Lich King, there was this tournament area in the northwest of Icecrown. I cannot for the life of me remember the story behind it or why it was there. It's not important. What is important is that it was a festive, busy area when it came out. Everyone was doing the quests and dailies. The activities were fun. Music was going. I had good memories of it. Then it died and stayed dead. You can go visit it, assuming you can figure out how to get there, and it is still very much dead. Music is still playing, NPCs talking, no player except maybe one on occasion visiting the area. This to me has been a big problem Blizzard has with WoW. World of Warcraft is like having a house that every member of the family keeps building new rooms and additions to, without a plan, no one consulting each other, just everyone doing their own thing with a different aesthetic, a different function, or a ridiculously redundant one. Then new owners come in and build upon those additions and add more rooms, hallways, basements, and the like. No plan, no one taking notes about the new blueprint. Though the original house had everything you needed or might want, nope, we're all just going to keep adding to it with no thought to what comes after that. Trying trying to outdo the previous additions to the house with crazier and bigger, well, whatever. So you end up going into one kitchen and there's a huge fountain with goldfish in it swimming around. You plunge on ahead to the next part of the house because you've been wandering around for hours probably and are completely lost, and end up in a maze of mirrors in some giant room. No idea why it's there, and you're the only one who made it this far because everyone else has killed themselves. But you are hardcore and nostalgic, so you press on. You finally make it to the day room of the original house and remember all the good times you had there, but then you note how utterly dead it is. Lifeless, depressing. So you ask yourself, why didn't the original owners just take the original house and make it even better? Come up with ways to make people happy with what they originally had and give reasons to come back to it so that the whole house didn't end up as a sprawling, confusing maze whose individual lives of each new part didn't die with the next new addition. World of Warcraft jumped the shark. They had to know this would be a problem. I can only assume it was greed or desperation that had them keep committing to the loop that led to this point. Just like the people who did the show Supernatural, with every new edition having to top the one before. I personally do not want to wander lost in a game and come to an area and wonder, why in hell is there a damn circus in the middle of a damn frozen tundra, completely lifeless and ignored? Why didn't they give people incentives to keep coming there, or put something like that where people would find it? I do not want to spend weeks watching YouTube videos and reading articles about how to play a game, and figure out how to use what my main characters already have, and a chance at remembering why and where I got that special mount or item in the first place. I keep reaching the same conclusion. Blizzard needs to reboot World of Warcraft. Start over, employing all the lessons learned through the years, including all the WoW classic stuff. Just start over, and this time, instead of adding new zones or worlds or pocket dimensions with every expansion, try developing the initial ones. Add depth and story to them. Add factions and power dynamics between rival houses or factions. Overhaul and improve the look of the game, and do all of it. Quest design, mapping of storylines, and expansion breakdown with an idea of where they're going to go with it in a year, or 10 years, or even 20. Make it so I can log in after a 2-year hiatus and immediately be able to know what I should be doing and not be lost or overwhelmed. And I don't mean dumbing down the content or mechanics. There are some things that just should not be complicated. I played Elder Scrolls Online for years and quit for 2 years, but even now I could log into that game and still figure out what I can and should be doing and where to go for it. That game has its own share of problems. I'm not plugging for it, but it's simple in all the areas where it should be. And for those WoW players afraid to lose what they have now, Blizzard can acknowledge those who invested with the old game by returning the earned rewards they achieved, or fast track the process for them to reacquire it without having to kill themselves grinding in a particular raid with only a 1% chance of a drop. But ultimately, the game needs a reboot or massive reset, whatever you want to call it. It's too much of a mess, and it's time to pass the torch to a better and new WoW, with everything that made the old one awesome and none of what has dragged it down. Make WoW great again, Blizzard.